Good afternoon, everyone. Mic check. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you fine.
Thank you.
Hey, Estelle, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Estelle, I'm going to go ahead and move the consultant over to a panelist, so just
Wonderful. Thank
for
you.
better use of time.
Appreciate that. Let's do it.
And Mr. Svensson, you will have control of your camera and your microphone now.
Hi, Doug. It's Estelle. Are you able to test your mic and your video?
Yeah, yes, testing 1, 2, 3. Can you guys see me and hear me okay?
Apologies.
Other Doug.
Councilmember Holder, we got two Dougs on the line.
All right.
Yes, I think I got it now.
There we go. Wonderful. I just wanted to check before we get started. Thank you. To both of you.
All right. I knew you said hi to me already, so. It's been that kind of day. The Tuesday after a Monday holiday is like a Monday times 3 for me. So it's
absolutely.
Doug Svensson, this is Carrie. Just so you know, I have your PowerPoint and I've merged it with our ED agenda. So I'll be the presenter. So when we get to your item, I'll go ahead and handle the PowerPoint. So no worries on your end. If you just want to let me know when to advance the next slide, I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And sometimes there's a lag with my computer. So when you say next slide, sometimes it takes a few seconds to transition. So it's not that I didn't hear you. Just sometimes it just takes a little bit to move forward. So
okay, great.
Sure.
Thank you to Assistant Community Development Director Netta Zayer for joining us as well today. See you join the panel.
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me?
yes, Nita.
Yes, we can.
Hi. I'm
Good
sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. I don't know if you can see me, but I am here.
Good. Wow.
And present.
Wonderful.
I do think your name's spelled correctly.
Great. That's not always the case.
I know. I did a whole meeting with my name called Sober without realizing my name was called Sober. That was on a prior meeting that somebody wanted me to attend, and I thought that was a password, and I put in Sober as my name. I thought, wow, people are thinking, wow, Doug's really owning this thing, you know? That was classic.
That's great. All right, we're approaching the 4 o'clock hour. I believe we have, oh, hello, Councilman Brown. I believe we have a quorum and we have hit the 4 o'clock hour.
I would like to call the meeting to order if everyone's here. Can't see. Let's see.
Okay, Councilmember Johnson has not joined, but you do have the quorum.
Can I have the clerk give us roll call?
Chair Brown,
Here.
Vice Chair Halter,
Here.
and Committee Member Johnson is currently absent.
All right. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes from May 4th?
So moved.
And I guess I'll second since no one else is here. So it's approved as long as it's approved in the second, because there's just two of us, right?
You have a quorum. We do need to do the roll call vote though because of the Brown Act in
Okay,
virtual
sure.
meetings. So Chair Brown,
Yes.
Vice Chair Halter,
Yes.
and Councilmember Johnson is absent.
Okay. And is he absent, like he notified you, or he just for whatever reason is not here?
I defer to Estelle on that. I do not know.
Okay. Estelle, did he check in and say he wasn't going to be present, or?
I haven't heard from him, but I'm checking my emails right now to see if something's come up.
Okay, in the meantime, we can go ahead and ask if there's any public communications, we can start with those.
There are no public communications.
Okay, well, it's 4:02, so I'm willing to wait till 4:05 to see if Councilmember Johnson checks in, excuse me, with Estelle.
I'll shoot him a quick email moment right here and see if I can hear back from him.
Okay, so we'll just wait a few moments, and then after that, it'll be turned over to Estelle for the presentation. So I just called him and he said that he's going to try to sign in right now. So anyway, when Mr. Johnson gets into the room, Estelle is going to introduce Doug Svensson. I know I messed that up. Sorry. From Applied Development Economics Incorporated.
And Councilmember Johnson has joined the meeting.
Yay. Okay, so take it away, Estelle.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. As Councilwoman Brown mentioned, we are joined today by Doug Svensson of Applied Development Economics, Inc. They work for our consultant, Ramey and Associates, on the general plan that is currently underway right now. As part of the general plan, there is an economic development element as a piece to that. This is an optional piece that we choose to engage with because it's very important to our community. So Doug and his team have been pulling through a lot of data and putting together a picture of our current economic state in the city in our region. And I'm glad to be joined with Doug today, and I'm going to turn it over to him for the presentation. Doug?
Doug, you are muted.
So sorry. Okay, thank you very much, Estelle. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to be with you all this afternoon. As Estelle mentioned, I'd like to review some trends that we've been analyzing and look in particular at some key segments of the city's economy in terms of job creation, the retail market, the relationship of economic development to the city's budget and fiscal health, and then talk a bit about some future trends and hopefully have a bit of a discussion on the vision for economic development in Ventura going forward. Next slide. As most of you are aware, the general plan is a long-term document. We're actually looking out to 2040 for this general plan update, so 20 years. So as we go through this information, you'll see that we are acknowledging some of the trends that have come out of the recent pandemic and the recession, but our focus really is on the longer term economic development and the land use relationships. Next slide. We're at the point now where we're looking at the visioning for the general plan. We've been through a process of discovery. We've just published a economic development existing conditions paper for people to look at, and a lot of the information that I'm presenting today comes from that document. We're now looking at the vision for the future, and that'll work into discussion and evaluation of alternatives and policy development. And then toward the latter part of next year, we expect to have a draft of the general plan for public review. Next slide. Some of the key goals for economic development that kind of inform our approach to the topic, it certainly can help strengthen the city's resiliency from the standpoint of economic strength, but also fiscal health. A proactive economic development program can help encourage jobs in industries that have a future, that have growth potential. Can also help us create high-paying jobs for local residents, and really importantly, career opportunities for young people, so as they grow up in Ventura, go away to college, they have jobs and careers to come back to. Ventura has a number of important educational institutions, not only Ventura College here in the city, but in the region. So it provides an opportunity to collaborate there and make sure that workforce training aligns with the needs of businesses and job growth. It's a way also certainly of enhancing the quality of life in terms of providing a vibrant commercial and entertainment sector for residents and for visitors, but also it's incredibly important for the city's fiscal health and funding services from police and fire to streets and sidewalks, parks and recreation, the whole range. Next slide. This next chart kind of reinforces these last 2 points. We have land uses and populations in terms of housing, the residents, jobs and visitors in the tourism sector, and all of those contribute significantly to sales tax, property tax, and the transient occupancy tax. And as you look at the percentages of general fund for each of those revenues, it adds up to more than half of the general fund revenue tax base. So it's a significant contribution to the city's fiscal picture. Those revenues obviously fund public facilities and services, which are a major part of the quality of life in residential neighborhoods. Next slide. Some of the key themes, I'll give you a preview as we go through the data. The city is kind of holding along with the county in terms of job trends, but both are lagging well behind state economic trends. The city has a number of opportunities with innovative industry clusters, but a key issue is having the housing that can support the labor force that goes along with those businesses. Retail's been very strong for the city for a number of years, but it's been facing some real challenges that have been really exacerbated this last year, as I'm sure you're aware. Tourism also is a big contributor to city revenues, but has been hit really hard most recently. But also other non-residential land uses, retail, office, industrial businesses, all are important contributors to city revenues. And as it relates to the fiscal impact of land use, we are showing that the older existing housing has very low assessed values and really no longer creates the tax base that is necessary to support municipal services, which is contributing, I think, to the city's structural deficit. Whereas newer, higher density housing creates a better fiscal balance. And I'll have some figures to show you in just a moment on that. Next slide. And I guess we'll move into the next section. So this slide kind of shows the job trends and existing employment for a number of the different kinds of industries. The total bar shows the jobs in 2020 as of March, really before the pandemic hit. So most of the jobs, or the three largest sectors, are in healthcare, retail trade, and accommodation and food services, which is the tourism industry. And you can see the green additions, those are the growth from 2010 to 2020. So each of those sectors had substantial job growth over the last 10 years. Overall, the city has slightly more jobs than it has employed labor force, so that's a positive statistic. And it has a jobs housing ratio of 1.4, which is relatively good compared to other communities throughout the state. But as I mentioned earlier, the rate of growth over the last 10 years has been well below the state average. And if we go back to the beginning of the Great Recession to before the pandemic, we can see that actual economic activity in the city has never completely recovered from what it was prior to the Great Recession. Some of the sectors that have actually lost jobs during the last 10 years are professional and scientific and tech services. You can see the red bar there. Also finance and insurance and information. So some of those are important sectors, as well as government, public administration, have really never recovered from the last Great Recession. Next slide. In terms of the key industry clusters, I mentioned healthcare is the largest. It's obviously been heavily affected by the pandemic. The city does also have some medical device manufacturing, though, which is an important component. Business services is a very large cluster. There's been a lot of growth in corporate management offices, which is interesting. We've also seen growth in computer systems design and design services. Now, with the increase of remote work, which may extend into the future indefinitely for some businesses, that will affect the office market, which could have indirect effects on this cluster. Tourism and hospitality obviously has been heavily affected by the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, that industry was looking to add more regional visitor attractions, as well as a better range of lodging options to increase visitors. So it's going to take probably a number of years for that sector to come back. Next slide. Some of the more tech clusters that the city has are advertising and marketing technology, perhaps exemplified by the trade desk. These have pretty good growth potential, but the real challenge is attracting and retaining the workforce. And there again, we need a mix of housing in the city that this labor force can afford at a number of different ranges of affordability. The manufacturing sector also has some technology components in terms of 3D printing. Again, they'll be looking for modern industrial space, so there need to be locations where new industrial development can occur, and also an increasing talent pool, which gets back to the housing issue. And then finally, the city has some opportunities to diversify its agricultural food processing, so to speak, with aquaculture out in the harbor. And so we're keeping our eye on that opportunity in terms of cultivating mussels. And I mentioned design services as a growth sector that feeds into business services and marketing technology. Next slide. So as I kind of indicated, there are a number of challenges to capitalize on the potential for these clusters, housing being probably the main one that we heard from a lot of businesses we've talked to so far. There's a wide range of housing needed, from millennials to all the way up to executive housing. There will be a lot of push to modernize office and industrial buildings as technology. A lot of the trends coming out of the pandemic is increased automation and technology that needs new building forms. And so as a general plan update proceeds, we'll be looking at the need to update development codes and provide locations for those kinds of developments. At the same time, the city has a lot of existing commercial buildings that maybe are getting outmoded but could be adaptively reused, or provide locations for mixed use development. And so having the right zoning and development standards to allow for those kinds of building reuses will also be important. We want to continue to look at coordination with educational institutions, because the skills requirements in these industries are changing rapidly. And so there's a constant need for retraining and upskilling of the local workforce. And then finally, I mentioned the need for more visitor attractions, upscale lodging, which may be something that will occur over time as the industry gets back on its feet. Next slide. So we're going to talk now a little bit about the retail market. If we can move on to the next round of slides. Before the pandemic, so this is as of 2019, the city of Ventura actually had the best per capita sales capture of any of the cities in Ventura County. Next slide. So that's a pretty positive development. We estimate that the total purchasing power in the city is $1.24 billion per year. About 75% of that comes from household spending, but 20% of it actually is due to the tourism market and visitor spending. And then there's another 5% at least that is business-to-business transactions or commuters that come into the city. Next slide. The actual sales in the city exceed that demand by over $800 million a year. And even though there are a couple weak spots in terms of apparel and home furnishings, generally Ventura has been capturing sales from communities in the surrounding area, as well as tourism. Next slide. Some of the biggest sales tax generators are automotive, food and drinking, which again are the tourism industry primarily. And then general merchandise is about 11%, which includes the mall and some of the other larger format retailers. Next slide. So as we're all aware, retail has been seeing dramatic changes for some years. This is a long-term chart showing internet sales as a percent of total retail going all the way back to the year 2000. Up until this last year, there was a pretty steady trend, and we pretty much projected that to grow at the same rate. But now this year, that's all accelerated up to 7 or 8 years of progress on the trend that we were on. We certainly expect that to drop off as stores reopen and people begin to go back to their normal patterns, but it's likely to restabilize at a higher trend. And so e-commerce is going to be an even bigger concern going forward. That's had the effect of reducing the number of brick and mortar stores, but also reducing the size of new stores that are built. So a lot of retailers are going to smaller formats, recognizing that a higher percentage of their sales are going to come through online channels. That's kind of created the opportunity for a lot of the older retail buildings, particularly medium and large ones, to transform to distribution for last mile delivery for online sales. But also strip commercial areas are being occupied more and more by services and lower end retail. And this trend that the last bullet here has been going on for a number of years, but really is accelerating now, is that retail is less about goods and services, more about experience and entertainment. So there's a constant need to rejuvenate the retail base, create new attractions, new ways to attract customers into the stores. Next slide. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit, talk more about the fiscal connection between economic development and land use. And what we've done with this chart is to evaluate the existing land use inventory in the city as it relates to city revenues and costs. And these bars show for each of the different land uses what they generate on a per acre basis when we take revenues and subtract what we think is needed for municipal costs. And we can see that on the right-hand side of the chart, hospitality, office, commercial, industrial, those non-residential land uses generate a surplus on a per acre basis. And this is typical of many cities in California. And that surplus helps to balance the city budget. On the left-hand side of the chart, we see the existing single-family base actually creates a bit of a negative. And I'm going to show in the next slide some of the details of that. But if we have above average single-family homes or high-density multifamily homes, then we get back to more of a positive balance between revenues and costs. And if we could look at the next slide, I can kind of talk about some of the details there. So we've estimated that the average assessed value for single family homes in Ventura is $342,850. So you'll recognize right away that's way below market value. And a lot of that is because those homes have been occupied for years, and unless they turn over or substantially renovated, their assessed value has only increased 2% per year. The figure for multifamily is even lower at about 235,000. So these two cases are shown on the left side of this red vertical bar, single family. We have the revenues in green and the costs in yellow, and the net is the blue. But if we look at single family from the standpoint of what it would take to break even, we've calculated a figure of 445,000, which is still below market, but well above the average assessed value. That's the point at which the property tax begins to actually cover the full cost of services to residential neighborhoods. We've also looked at multifamily at 30 units per acre, where we can design a mix of higher end housing, moderate affordable housing, lower income housing, and achieve a balance of an average assessed value of 542,000. That generates a positive fiscal benefit as well. So as we're looking at different housing options going through the general plan update process, we'll be looking at these models to find ways to create housing at a level that supports the city's fiscal health. Next slide, please. So we'll move on to looking at some of the future trends and what our vision for the future might be. Some of the trends that we're aware of, healthcare has been a tremendous job growth sector for a number of years, but with the financial impact of the pandemic, changes in the demographic trends, as well as some of the trends toward more telehealth and automated telemedicine, there's a chance that that job engine is going to slow down. And so that could affect Ventura significantly because that's where a lot of your job growth has been. On the other hand, there's opportunities for increasing pharmaceutical manufacturing as the US tries to build up its resiliency as part of the experience with the pandemic. And e-commerce is expanding the need for warehouse space. So that's putting a lot of interest in the industrial market but that's also creating costs for other industries. So I mentioned that manufacturing is looking at increased trends toward automation, 3D printing, robotics, machine learning. They're going to be looking for new modern facilities to house those operations. And so there needs to be the land inventory to compete not only with the warehouse space, but also these trends toward increasing manufacturing. And then finally, the office market could be affected. As I mentioned, there could be as much as 20% of office workers that continue remote working as much as 3 days a week. And so that could really create a lot of weakness in the office market, may affect the availability of space for other growing industries. Next slide. So I mentioned early on, one of the goals for economic development is to create jobs for local residents. So we've done a comparison here of jobs that are in the city and workers that are in the city in terms of what jobs they're employed in. And this chart compares the jobs in the city in the dark blue bar and then the workers in the red bars. So for example, at the top there are twice as many healthcare jobs in the city as there are healthcare workers living here. Similarly, in government, tourism, construction, and even corporate management, there are a lot more jobs in Ventura. The workforce tends to commute in from other cities around. But on the other side, we have more workers than jobs in a number of important sectors, including education, professional services, manufacturing, finance, and information technology. Next slide. So we've kind of focused in on those sectors as potential targets for more job development and attraction. So those job figures are shown here in the first column. But we've also done an analysis of what the average wages are, which is the next column over. And if we translate that into household income and what the typical job in these different sectors can afford in terms of housing, you can see both the affordable median housing price if you're going to purchase a home and also the affordable rent levels. Down at the bottom of the table, it shows what we think the typical housing price is currently in Ventura at $729,950, and that figure comes from the Ventura County Coastal Association of Realtors. Only one sector, the finance and insurance, comes close to being able to afford that price on a median level, which means 50% of the workers could afford it, 50% couldn't. In terms of rental, the Dyer Sheehan Group has shared with us in their survey from last summer, the average rent was $1,975. Only 4 of these sectors can even meet that level in terms of rent, and a number of them, from education on down to arts and entertainment, can really only afford rents that are below average in Ventura. So there's significant challenges here in terms of bringing in new jobs and matching the workforce to these available housing opportunities. Next slide. So just to wrap up, and a lot of these are themes that I've been repeating as we go along, but growing businesses do support the fiscal health and quality of life of the city, not only in terms of retail and entertainment and the sales tax, but also manufacturing and office uses, which strengthen the property tax base. Ventura has a number of opportunities, but really housing appears to be the major constraint and what's needed to stimulate growth in those sectors. Higher density housing will help to solve that problem and also create a better fiscal balance for the city. So that looks like the direction for the general plan update. Retail has been a big part of the city's fiscal picture. That's going to be challenged now and for the foreseeable future as that industry goes through a number of transitions. And again, visitor sector has also been an important contributor to the city's fiscal strength. That sector is going to take several years probably to recoup the losses from this last year. And so there are a number of challenges that the city is facing as we go into this general plan update. Next slide. So that is the overview of some of the key trends that we've been working on identifying. Today, what we'd like to do is get your input on any questions you have on that information, but also if you could share with us what you see some of the city's long-term economic goals for the general plan as we're putting together the vision statement. What land use changes would improve the city's economic outlook from your perspective? What areas of the city, either retail or another non-residential, do you think need some improvement or could be modified to improve economic development in the city? So those are some questions we'd like to throw out for your consideration, and certainly looking forward to your questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Stevenson. So Estelle, I know, is it okay for us to go ahead and ask a few questions, although we have some time to maybe sneak something else in, but
Yeah, I was gonna take this time to invite questions and comments from the committee at this time. And then additionally, I know we have a few people attending the meeting as well. And if we were in person, we would probably be able to engage a little bit more casually and receive some input and feedback from our members, from the participants as well. So first, I would ask to receive some feedbacks and comments from the committee members. And if time permits, open it up to any participants that would like to comment or ask questions as well. So at this time, I'll turn it over to the committee for any comments or questions on the presentation.
sure. I would just ask that my fellow colleagues maybe try to limit it to 3 questions so that we have time to move through the rest of the meeting. And if Doug or Mike have any questions, let me see if I can see anybody raising their hands. I don't. So go ahead, Doug, and then Mike, if I know you're on the phone, if you have something, we'll circle back to you.
Gloria, is it only questions then at this point, or questions and comments?
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, just in case. Okay, I love the statistics. Doug, thank you very much for that report. I think it bears light on the fact that we have done a great job over the last 30 or 40 years providing the middle income house opportunity, but a very poor job at providing the entry-level house and the executive housing. Those are the 2 areas that I feel would absolutely increase our economic vitality as a community. Secondly, its question is, since we're job rich in certain areas, you mentioned doctors or healthcare facility providers, do we know where these people are living? And conversely, for the jobs that we don't have enough of in our community, where are our Ventura neighbors driving to? Do we know those 2 answers?
We have some of that information, although I don't have it in front of me today. It's not real fine grained, so we don't necessarily know where healthcare workers are living that are driving in, but we have it in a little more broad categories. But we do have information about the general commute patterns in and out, and I don't have that in the report, but we can pull that out and make that.
It would just
be information that we can work with in terms of defining strategies.
Great, thanks, Doug. I think that would be helpful. And then finally, I just want to mention that in my business, I go through many different municipalities. So I have a gut feel where people are driving to and why, and what people commute into Ventura. And I think the greenest thing we could do if we really care about the environment is to put our jobs next to our houses or someplace near where people are living. And so I've always thought that'd be a good idea to see where people in Santa Barbara, people that work in Santa Barbara, where they live and what jobs people in Ventura, what companies are driving to, in places like Santa Barbara and Camarillo. And I also want to mention that as a service provider, the one industry that can't be taken out of a community is the service providers. Yet, as a service provider, there's only 2 parts of our city that are zoned in a way that would allow my business. And when I look to expand, what I heard more times than I cared to count is you need to look in Oxnard. Well, the day that I can't have my business in our own city is the day that I would probably shut down my business. So that's how committed I am to being here in Ventura. But I see the issues. And I guess the final thing is I'm very focused on the development process that we've been working on, because I do believe very, very strongly that if we fix the development process, there are so many people in our community and outside who want to invest in our community and create the types of things and the economic vitality that we all need in our community. But currently, until we fix our development processes, we're pushing more people away, and we're creating an increased bad reputation for our community. So that's truly my highest priority is the development process and fixing that, because that's low hanging fruit to me.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Councilmember Halter.
Okay.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, thank you. I just would like to second what Councilmember Halter said about keeping our jobs next to our housing. You know, we're a city where we have every morning people that drive up to Santa Barbara or to Ojai to go work, while at the same time we've got people coming in from Santa Paula or Fillmore to come work in Ventura. And so it's great that we have, last I checked, a slightly higher daytime population than nighttime population. It's not because we're actually stable. And we really do need to fix that. One of the biggest obstacles we have to denser multifamily housing is when the community hears about it, they worry about traffic and parking. We need to be a job where, you wouldn't even, a household with 2 adults wouldn't need 2 cars for them to be able to live and work in Ventura. As for healthcare, I think we need to be prepared not just for a slowdown, but perhaps a dramatic reduction in healthcare in the city of Ventura. The industry is changing so quickly. As some of you probably know, my wife is a physician. And so, I have seen behind the scenes what's going on in the industry, and I'm concerned that we are not. Sure.
Oh, I think we might have lost you, Councilmember Johnson. I mean, committee member. We can't hear you.
Hear me?
Now I can.
What part did you miss?
Oh, it was just the very last few words. Like, we didn't miss the whole thing, just like.
It was around the dramatic reduction in the healthcare industry.
Oh, I think that we could see a dramatic reduction in the healthcare industry. My wife is a physician, so I see a lot of what's going behind the scenes locally, and I think we need to be prepared for a contraction in the city of Ventura. And those would be my comments. Thank you.
Thanks. So I just slide 22 and 26, I just had a question on. So when you were talking about the higher density and higher value residential help create a higher tax base, can you explain exactly how that works or how that's possible? Because in the past, I've always heard, affordable housing and, high density housing that is more affordable is gonna cost the city more. And I'm assuming they were talking about the very, very low, but I'm not sure if you're talking about moderate here. So.
Yes, it relates directly to the assessed value of the units. So the higher the assessed value, then the more property tax gets to the city. There's also a little bit of an effect with higher income households generating a little bit more sales tax, but that impact is not as much. And so, granted, the city needs affordable housing as well as we talked about, as well as middle income housing and executive housing. The opportunity that we see with the higher density is not for a single income segment in the housing, but a mixture of incomes and housing types and values, so that we average out at a higher level while still providing affordable housing for households that need that, but also some more higher value housing for other households.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting. So kind of like a promontory point where they have the single family homes, and then it goes up the hill, and then some of them look more like brownstones and they're closer together. And then as it gets to the top, they're apartment or townhomes or something, apartment units. And then there's the park. And so it like gradually, they get smaller to accommodate different incomes. And so is that kind of what you're expressing
Yes.
when you're saying high density, multifamily, different types of uses?
Yes, exactly. And it doesn't have to all occur in the same building or the same project, but as we're looking at the land use plan in the new general plan, as long as we have a mix of housing opportunities that meets that threshold, then we should have a good fiscal outcome.
And that would be accomplished by, enforcing or utilizing the in lieu fees, if it's not on the same project, in other words.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, that answers that question. And, the last one is, if on this scale was added next to the existing single family, very low affordable, would the negative be much larger, like negative 4,000 or something like that?
Yes, yes, if you had affordable housing at, let's say, the very low income level, then yes, the unit values are going to be even lower, and that negative would be higher, greater.
And so that's even if those projects are built in collaboration with like private entities like Cabrillo Economic Development Corporation and or the Housing Authority, would it still have as negative effect, or does that soften the blow?
Well, from a fiscal standpoint, it depends on how the assessor treats the tax assessed valuation of the, so,
So in other words, if it's not the city versus the Housing Authority who holds the.
Well, Committee Member Brown, sorry, I'm gonna hop in here. We're also talking kind of more about the long-term effects of these projects in the community and what revenues get generated from those projects to sustain over a longer period of time. So regardless of if during the project stage, what the partnership is, it's really, as Doug was about to get into, the assessed value of the property. So if the value of the property has a higher assessment, those are going to generate more revenues for our general fund to support the services for our city, versus those that don't have a higher assessed value that would potentially contribute less from a tax assessment and general fund level. That makes sense.
That does make sense. Thank you. And just so you guys know where I'm coming from as we go into the general plan discussion about more housing, I know one of the arguments has been against affordable housing is, well, the city can't afford it because it's a negative for the city, because the property values, we don't get much back on it. And so, I'm trying to find out, like, where is that balanced out? Is it balanced out somewhere else economically within the city's portfolio? It may not be seen necessarily directly with the sales tax revenues, but hopefully somewhere else.
Right. It goes back to the balance of housing, right? So if we do need that housing stock of that affordable housing units, but to the point of the data, what it's telling us is to balance that out from the cost to the city perspective. We also need to have the additional housing of those higher values, those higher value residentials, whether they be single family or condos, whatever those are, to help bring that balance. So when we talk about all of this data in terms of driving economic development in the city and bringing those higher quality jobs and bringing jobs closer to housing, is really that need for just more all types of housing, right? Pushing all types of housing. So those that are commuting in from other areas could look to Ventura as a place that they could afford, whether it be on the low end or the high end, based off of their salary in their job industry.
Okay, thank you. And then slide 26. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear in understanding the graph. The point on this slide was saying that we know we have 100 workers, let's say in the healthcare industry, but there's 200 jobs. So in other words, there's 100 more jobs available that are not filled. Is that what it's saying? Because they can't live here, or the commute's too difficult, or something like that.
Right. So in that example, there's 100 workers commuting in to take those jobs. We don't know exactly why they're not living in the city, but we can imagine that it has to do with housing opportunities to a large degree.
Oh, so the workers actually represent people who live in the city.
Yes, the workers are those that
Oh.
actually live in the city. The jobs are located in the city. So all the jobs are filled, but they're not all filled
Oh.
by people who live in Ventura. A lot of them are filled by people that live in, other cities.
Okay, and you may want to clarify that in the future, because that part I was,
Okay.
that workers that
Okay.
work in the city of Ventura, jobs that are filled, but not, yeah, but anyway, that was it. Thank you
Thanks for
so
that feedback.
much.
Yeah, I can see that's confusing.
Thank you.
Well, Committee Member Halter, so you have your hand up?
Just one last quick comment, and that's when we look at attractions and entertainment, Ventura is extremely rich in those opportunities. I would say we probably take advantage of maybe 30% of what we're capable of, because between our natural environment with our islands and our mountains behind us, with our open space, with the land trust, with the rivers and natural rivers, the last two in Southern California, beaches, if we spent more time educating people on the importance of the San Juan Slough, for instance, that's an opportunity. You look at, for years, we pushed Ventura as a new art city. We knew if we said that, people would come. It's a very, very creative community. So when we started Rubicon, a world-class professional theater, and we started the music festival and the botanical gardens, those are attractions that almost entirely were started by passionate members of our community with nonprofit dollars, people donating into our community. So we have, you add to that our history and our unique neighborhoods and just the ambiance we have in our city. There is so much we could do. There is so much we could do from an attraction standpoint. We just have to really fine tune and embrace all the groups that are doing those sort of things and work with them and make it easier for them to do the things they do, because they are bringing millions and millions of dollars to our community, and they're making it a much higher quality of life for all of us.
Very good point, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
Could I say
And-
something
oh.
quickly?
Please.
Thank you. I don't know how we're doing with the time. I was trying to keep it short. Just in terms of answering the questions for land use changes, the two that come to mind, I think we really need to increase our flexibility for what's allowed in the commercial zones when we look at land use. And the state, whether we like it or not, the state is expecting us to be flexible in what now is zoned as single family residential. When we talk about housing, we're going to have to confront that. And those would be my comments. Thank you.
I really appreciate you saying that, Committee Member Johnson. That was going to be my final comment, is the need for flexibility in terms of what we've identified for those land use changes. Committee Member Halter mentioned earlier professional services, how that can only exist in 2 different areas in the city, and what limits that puts on our businesses being able to open here and expand here and grow their businesses. And so we really need to be able to look at how our land uses can be more flexible so that businesses can operate a variety of different ways. One of the things that we have also seen over the last 2 decades is the evolution of businesses moving more vertically, where you can see production, manufacturing, and retail and operations all happening in the same space from the back to the front, and really being able to create land uses that provide for that opportunity, so that our businesses can be here and grow and expand in the ways that businesses are doing so these days in this modern, more flexible, more vertical, more digital environment. So I offer that as well as just observations that I have seen. We do have about 10 more minutes left. I know we've got a lot of, or we may have some participants still left on the phone call or on the call today. I wanted to extend to see if any of our participants on the presentation for today's presentation have any comments or questions that they would also like to add.
I'm sorry, Sal, are you asking for public
I was
communications?
just going to see if anybody was going to had any comments or questions that they wanted to pop into a comment box. If there were any, if not, I can move on. But I just wanted to offer that up. I know normally if we're in a face-to-face environment, we would have that opportunity. So I know it's a little bit awkward where we are now, but yeah.
We do have 2 public speakers that would like to speak on this item.
Wonderful.
The first one will be Trevor Gottsman, and the second one is Sandy Smith. And as of June 1st, we are making everyone panelists like we do in their council meetings.
Oh.
Mr. Gottsman, I've moved you to a panelist. You have control of your mic and your camera.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, rather. Okay, I did send an email today, and because it relates to what we're speaking about now pretty closely, we've got a huge volunteer force. A lot of us we've all got different resources available to us, and a lot of us have that opportunity. And to build community, the best thing to do is, I believe, is show us how our city runs, and let us help you run the city. And so essentially think, as I said, think of it as a big university campus, but to me, or, big, whatever, Disneyland almost. Everybody is there to take part in whatever, but not so much Disneyland. I just think of Disneyland as the parking and the mass transit. So excuse that comment. I'm really speaking about volunteers, setting up a one-stop shop for everybody to come in, sign up and say, this is what I'm capable of. These are my times. This is when I'm available. Use me as I'm willing to help and learn the community, and then teach us how and show us that office, wherever it is the one that brings us, steers us to the people that are in need, or the resources that the city is, that suits the applicant. So that's really all I wanted to say at this point, and just to think of it in those terms, rather than in dollar terms, pure dollar terms. Think of it as a village where we're just stuck, post-apocalypse kind of a thing, fresh thinking. So that's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor.
Our next speaker is, well, actually I cannot move Mr. Smith the way he's joined to be a panelist, but let me see if I can unmute him. Mr. Smith, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I was really glad to hear Councilmember Johnson talk about the need for flexibility, and then reinforced by Estelle. I think that's extremely important. I've been banging around in the city for quite a while now, and actually was part of the 2005 general plan. So it's not going to be a shocker to me if we find a lot of discussion about corridors and the importance of focusing some of our economic development and future growth along the corridors, and the flexibility that we need to do that, I think, is an important thing to consider. We often talk about Main Street, Thompson corridors, Midtown. I would just throw out Telegraph Road as a corridor that also has great opportunity. And then in speaking of flexibility and areas of opportunity, I really think that we should really think about the opportunity that exists on our west side, where we have M3 zoning and a lot of properties that are going to transition over these next couple of decades as we sort of move away from fossil fuels as a focus of our economy. We've got a lot of acreage there that are literally just storage areas for pipes and other things, I think, that are going to be opening up to other uses. And we start thinking about what that means. I think it's novel for us. It's something I think that a lot of us have talked about for a while, to be trying to connect our land use element to an economic strategy. And the more that this council can support that, I think the better off we'll be. So those are my comments, and thank you for your time.
If I may, Estelle, good to see you, Sandy. Or hear you.
Of course. And I believe that may be the rest of our, you can give me 2 thumbs up, Tracy, if that's the last of them.
That concludes our public speakers.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for those comments from our community. Appreciate that. Now that does conclude our presentation at this time, and we have just about 5 minutes left. I did want to mention kind of the upcoming meeting and engagements that are happening, particularly these related to the general plan. We have an educational forum 2 happening this month. I'm going to give Committee Chair Brown a break on this, because I know she's probably been saying this message out over and over again. two educational forums happening this month, one on the housing in the middle of the month, and at the end of this week, our economic development educational element will be taking place. Our GPAC meetings, as you can see listed on the screen here, and we encourage you to continue to be involved in the general plan process. As you can see, economic development is a huge part of our city's success, and as we change the future of land use for the city with our general plan, it too has that will have a fundamental impact for our city's economic health in the future. With that, I can give.
Still, if you don't mind me adding one extra piece.
Please, please.
So yes, thank you. And if you know anybody in the public who'd like to attend the educational forum, that's this Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Doug will be providing a very similar presentation for that meeting with Q&A. And then also all of this content, the slides, and then a summary of what's discussed at these meetings will be put on the general plan update webpage. So if at any time you want to look at that information, provide input through the email list there, or look at any previous summaries of meetings, if you go to www.planventura.com, all of that information is there, and updates of all this engagement will be included there. So just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that resource. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Netta. Really appreciate that. As we conclude here, I will let everybody know that our next meeting will take place on Tuesday, July 6th, following the holiday weekend, and we will be starting at 4:30 p.m., our normal scheduled time. That will go for an hour from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, July the 6th. With that, I can kick it over to Chair Brown to adjourn the meeting if there's nothing else at this time.
Yes, I have nothing else. Thanks to everyone here, Estelle, all the staff, Netta, Carrie, and the panelists, or the committee members, sorry, Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Halter. So thank you, and the meeting is adjourned.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.